Brazil is the only nation to play in every single World Cup. They never failed to qualify. However, the current team has been pretty bad to say the least. And we have seen certain people flirt with the idea that Brazil could end up not qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. Now listen, is that a legit concern or just an overreaction? I mean, we made a poll here at the channel and over 30% of you all said that you think Brazil could in fact miss the 2026 World Cup. Well, today we're going to be going through the current situation at the World Cup qualifying in CONMEBOL and see if Brazil is actually in danger of not qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. And while we're at it, we're also going to be trying to predict every single CONMEBOL nation that will qualify for the World Cup next year to be played in the United States of America. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo and welcome to Chapéu Football, where you will find the best coverage of Brazilian football in English on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe right now. So today I want to analyze Brazil's situation in World Cup qualifying and, try to determine if they're actually at risk. And towards the end, I will predict all of the CONMEBOL nations that will qualify for the World Cup. Not just Brazil, all of them. At the time of this recording, Brazil's coach is still to be determined. And while we are covering the Ancelotti saga, like last week or 2 weeks ago, we learned that my jinxing powers are unreal. We made a video covering why Ancelotti was the perfect hire because it was pretty much a done deal. And then a couple hours after we released that video, the deal collapsed. So then we decided to make a video going through why the deal collapsed. And then after we made the video about the deal collapsing, the deal was back on. And now we don't know what's happening. So my jinxing powers are unreal. And I really need to be careful with it. It's what Uncle Ben used to say. With great powers come great irresponsibilities. And then Uncle Ben got shot in New York City. That's something you would expect to happen in Rio de Janeiro, not New York City. But Uncle Ben was not really known for being lucky, so he got killed in New York City. Rest in peace, Uncle Ben. Now, don't forget to drop a like in this video before we start and subscribe to Chapéu Football right now. Help us hit 5,000 subscribers as soon as possible. And let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think Brazil could not qualify to the 2026 World Cup? And since we don't have a coach yet, who do you want to be the Brazil national team head coach? Jorge Jesus, Ancelotti, Abel Ferreira, someone else? Okay, roll the episode. Okay, so the first thing that you must know before we start is that CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying still has 4 more rounds to go, which means every single team can still add up to 12 more points. The top 6 teams qualify directly to the 2026 World Cup, and the 7th place team goes to the Interconfederation Playoff, which is known as the repescagem in Brazil. And CONMEBOL has only 10 nations, which means if you're not part of the top 7, if you're in 8th place, 9th place, or 10th place, you probably suck and you don't deserve to go to the World Cup anyway. No, seriously, think about it. 70% of CONMEBOL can qualify to the World Cup. 70. The current table is as follows. With 14 out of 18 games played, Argentina leads with lots of comfort. They've been dominant and they are set to play in the 2026 World Cup. They have already qualified with 31 points in 14 games. They will likely finish in first place. Not that it really matters because first and sixth qualify to the World Cup anyway, but Argentina is set and they're there. Now from second place all the way to sixth place, the teams are only 3 points apart. They're very close. Ecuador is currently in second place with 23 points. Then in third place we have Uruguay with 21 due to goal differential because Brazil is in fourth also with 21 points. And then Paraguay is another team with 21 points but in fifth place. Now in sixth place we have Colombia with 20 points. And then in seventh, which is the first team out of the zone that qualifies directly to the World Cup, the team that goes to the repescagem or to the Interconfederation Playoffs, we have Venezuela with 15 points. In one position below Venezuela in 8th place, we have the altitude merchants Bolivia with 14 points. And then in 9th and 10th place, we have Chile and Peru. These teams only have 10 points, which means they're pretty much out. They're not going to really reach the top 6. maybe they could still fight for the 7th spot and go to the Interconfederation playoff. Even though I find that unlikely, I think Chile and Peru are done. Okay, now to determine if Brazil is actually at risk of missing out on the World Cup or not, we must look at the 7th and 8th place teams, which is Venezuela and Bolivia. With that, we have to try to determine if they can possibly surpass the Seleção Brasileira. So with that said, let's talk about Venezuela and Bolivia. Okay, so we have already established that there are 4 games to go, 4 games to be played, and that you will hit the like button in this video and subscribe to the channel. So let's assume that Venezuela and Bolivia win every single game that is left for them. That means they can add up to 12 points. But there is a problem, because these teams still face each other in June, which means you can't have both of them get 12 points. It could be both getting 10 if they tie in June, and then if one wins and the other loses, one will get 12 points, the other will get 9. What's my point here? You can't add 12 points to both. Venezuela will play Bolivia at home, then Uruguay and Argentina away, and then eventually they close with Colombia at home. Now Bolivia will play Venezuela away, then Chile at home, Colombia away, and they will close with Brazil at home. Now that you know that, let's go through a few scenarios. Okay, so scenario number 1. Venezuela gets all 12 points and Bolivia gets 9 points. The only game that they lose is the one that they play to Venezuela. In this scenario, Venezuela finishes with 27 points, Bolivia finishes with 23. Brazil right now has 21. So Brazil would essentially need to win 2 games and get 1 draw in 4 games, getting 7 points. Or just get 2 wins and rely on goal differential. Okay, so for scenario number 1, if Venezuela manages to win all 4 games, which, let's be real, it's probably not going to happen, Brazil would probably only need 2 wins out of 4 games to qualify. That's it. And if Brazil gets 2 wins and a draw, they are qualified, even if Venezuela wins all 4 games. So right away, we can establish that if Brazil gets 7 points in the next 12 that are available, they qualify regardless of what happens. 7 points. Now let's tackle scenario number 2, which is Bolivia getting 12 points and Venezuela getting 9, which means Venezuela would lose to Bolivia in their first game in June. In this scenario, Venezuela would have 24 points, Bolivia would have 26. Brazil right now has 21. So in this scenario, Brazil would only need 2 wins in 4 games to qualify. Or honestly, they would just need 1 win and 2 draws. Because if they tie Bolivia at 26 points, which means if Brazil gets 5 points, they would tie Bolivia in the same amount of points. But Bolivia has a negative 16 goal differential. So Brazil would advance on goal differential. Which means if Bolivia wins every single game that's left and gets 12 points, Brazil only needs 5 to qualify. Again, if you believe Bolivia or Venezuela are going to win every single game that's left, you probably also believe that Santa exists or the Tooth Fairy. I don't know. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. They're not going to win all 4 games. Now, scenario number 3 would be that Bolivia and Venezuela tie their game and then they win all other 3, which means Venezuela gets 10 points and Bolivia gets 10 points, which puts Venezuela with 25 points, Bolivia with 24, and Brazil right now has 21. In this scenario, Brazil only needs 2 wins to qualify directly, or 1 win and 2 draws. Brazil essentially needs 5 points minimum. Okay, so based on what I just told you, the odds, or I would say the odds of Brazil not qualifying for the 2026 World Cup are about as low as you winning the lottery or Leonardo DiCaprio dating someone his own age. But not as low as you hitting the like button, because you probably already did that. And listen, Brazil plays Ecuador away, Paraguay and Chile at home, and then they close with Bolivia away in La Paz, most likely in the altitude. Regardless of the coaching situation, Brazil can literally qualify with 1 win. Because let's be honest, Venezuela and Bolivia, they're not going to get 10 to 12 points out of the 4 games left. And let's say Brazil gets 2 wins. They just win the 2 home games, right? Against Chile and Paraguay. That should be enough for Brazil to qualify regardless of what Venezuela and Bolivia do. So realistically speaking, Brazil would just need probably 3 to 4 points to qualify. The Ecuador game is by far the toughest one, which is the next one for Brazil. the rest of the schedule is kind of fine. And Brazil will probably beat Paraguay at home and Chile, and that alone will get Brazil to the 2026 World Cup, regardless of Venezuela and Bolivia getting 10, 12 points, 9, 0, 1, whatever they get, which will probably be below 5, but Brazil will be in the World Cup. And listen, if you think there's actual risk of Brazil missing the World Cup, I respect your opinion, but I highly disagree with you. I think the risk of Brazil missing the 2026 World Cup is 0. I'd be willing to bet all the money I have, and I'm not a gambling guy, I don't really gamble that much, but I would bet all the money I have that Brazil will 100% be in the 2026 World Cup. There is absolutely no risk. And I know I talked about earlier in the video about my jinxing powers, but the odds here are so low that not even my jinxing powers can take down Brazil to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. Now, will Brazil be a candidate to win the World Cup? As things stand right now, no. If they get the good coach, if they get the right coach, then yes. Now, to wrap things up here, let's go through which will be the 6 nations that will qualify directly to the 2026 World Cup via CONMEBOL, and the 7th nation that will go to the Interconfederation playoff. All right, so Ecuador has 23 points right now, so they essentially need 1 win in 4 games to qualify. They play Peru, Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. And even if they don't get a win, they are likely to go through anyway. It's an impressive campaign from Ecuador because you have to take into account that they started with a -3 points. They started with negative points. So technically, they should have 26 right now. Ecuador is a very strong team and they will be in the 2026 World Cup. Now, Uruguay and Paraguay, they're in a similar situation to Brazil. They have the same amount of points, so around 4 points should be enough, maybe even 3 to qualify. And again, that's assuming Venezuela or Bolivia go on a spectacular run in the last 4 games, which, let's be real, it won't happen. So Uruguay and Paraguay, they're as safe as Brazil is, in my opinion. Now, Colombia, they have the least amount of points at 20. But again, 2 wins or 5 points in 4 games should be enough for them to qualify. They play Peru and Bolivia at home. If they win those games, they lock their spot in the 2026 World Cup. So honestly, I don't think Colombia is at risk also. And I know this prediction may sound boring, but I'm not going to just say things to sound controversial. I want to call a spade a spade. And to me, the current top 6, Argentina, Ecuador, Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay, and Colombia, they will qualify directly to the 2026 World Cup. That's what's going to happen. Then you'll have Bolivia and Venezuela fight for the 7th spot in the Interconfederation playoff. My prediction here is that it can go either way. I know this sounds weird, but I'm going to go with Bolivia going through, despite Venezuela having a better team, in my opinion. I think Bolivia will be able to hold a draw versus Venezuela in the next round in Venezuela. Then after that, they play Chile at home, Colombia away, and Brazil at home. They will likely end up with 3 more points. They'll get 1 win out of those games or a few draws here and there. Probably they'll beat Chile and then get a draw against Colombia or Brazil. Now, Venezuela, they're going to play Uruguay, Argentina away, and then Colombia at home, where I can easily see Venezuela getting 0 or just 1 point out of those 3 games. And then in this scenario, Bolivia would go play the Interconfederate playoffs or Interconfederation playoffs, and they haven't qualified to a World Cup since 1994. The problem is, this playoff round, they will not play at home. It's usually at neutral ground. It's probably going to be in the United States of America. So unless they put Bolivia to play, I don't know, in the altitude in Denver, I think even if they get the 7th spot, they probably won't qualify to the 2026 World Cup because I don't think this Bolivian team is very good. So for CONMEBOL, if they want to have 7 teams in the World Cup, it would be best if Venezuela finished 7th and not Bolivia. But based on the schedule, I think Bolivia will finish in 7th and lose their repescagem game. And then CONMEBOL will have only 6 nations in the 2026 World Cup. All right, everyone, thank you very much for watching. If you're Brazilian, relax. Brazil will be in the 2026 World Cup. The risk is not real. There is no risk. Brazil will be there. They will qualify once again. Too many CONMEBOL nations qualify. Brazil is absolutely not in danger to miss out in the 2026 World Cup. Don't forget to drop a like before you go. Subscribe to Chapéu Football. I want to thank you all very much for watching and have a great day.